Outgoing U.S. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta is on a week-long trip to Europe to discuss closer military ties. It includes a visit to Spain, where Washington is looking to double its defense presence this year. Let's get live analysis from Dr. Curtis Doebbler, a peace activist and international human rights lawyer in Geneva. Mr. Doebbler, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Now, the U.S. is enhancing its military presence in the Asian Pacific region to counterbalance China. Now, in the Middle East, its main concern is Iran. But what is their motive to bring more troops to Europe?
Well, as you know, the United States has always had a significant military presence in Europe. And they use that and project that outside of Europe very often. But I think countries like Russia are of concern to the United States, and certainly the countries in the sphere around Russia. And as you know, the United States has often used, in recent years especially, force as an instrument of foreign policy. And I think that that's still, unfortunately, part of their strategy.
Now, the U.S. is planning to double its presence in Spain while cutting it in half in Portugal. What is the point of relocating troops from one country to the other?
Well, they're constantly moving troops around, in part because countries are not very comfortable with having American troops stationed there. As you've seen in the Far East, in Japan, troops have committed crimes on the civilian population, and that has caused difficulties with their acceptance within the population. But I think the United States military strategy is to constantly be in flux and in movement. It's also a way to, if you will, share some of the huge military benefits from the U.S. military-industrial complex that has a significant profit and a significant economic impact on countries where it is placed.
Now, if you pay attention closely to what the Pentagon says, in the course of 2012, it can be quite confusing. Washington has announced plans to enhance its military presence in both the Asia-Pacific and the Middle East, and now Europe. Can all of this rebalancing and relocating be some sort of a hint of discord within the Pentagon itself?
I think there are certainly differences of opinion within the Pentagon. We've seen that with some of the statements made by Leon Panetta that might be the reason why he's leaving right now. In fact, where he's at one point in the last month said that we're spending money on weapons we don't need, and then has been sort of called back, if you will, or made other statements claiming that these cuts cannot be sustained, as they are now very possible going to happen in March when if the budget is not, or if the patches on the budget are not completely sealed over.
Now, if you look at what's happening, the U.S. is enhancing its military presence around the world, but they're also sustaining several ongoing foreign wars. How many more expansions and wars can they support with their finances and troops?
Well, you know, wars for the United States are a double-sided sword. On the one hand, because the military-industrial complex accounts for probably about 75% of the American economy, they produce an input to that economy. On the other hand, as we've seen in Afghanistan and Iraq, they also drain the economy on one side. So it's almost a endless circle. They have to continue often these interventions to be able to bring in the resources to be able to then say we're able to have new interventions. And unfortunately, that's been the story of the last 30 or 40 years.
All right. Now, Panetta, he's planning to resign in March. Do you think that Chuck Hagel, who is Obama's nominee for the next defense secretary, would continue the policy of extending American military presence throughout the world if he assumes this position?
Well, I say personally, having worked with some people who know both of these gentlemen quite well, I think we feel more comfortable in the human rights and peace community, perhaps with Chuck Hagel than we did with Leon Panetta, who was much more of a real down-to-earth military person and somebody who was willing to project American military force as a form of foreign policy. I think Chuck Hagel has shown, despite the fact that he's a Republican, has shown a lesser propensity to do that. But I think that it's still very little is in the hands, as we've seen, even of the President of the United States. The American military-industrial complex, which we've been warned about by presidents, is a very significant threat to the United States being at peace in any type of permanent manner.
All right. Appreciate your thoughts on the subject. That is Dr. Curtis Doebbler, peace activist and an international human rights lawyer from Geneva.